next speaker is Marshal Van Alstine, who's a professor at Boston Queenstrom School of Business. Marshall is one of the world's leading experts on network business models, IT economics, and strategy. He has made fundamental contributions to IT productivity and theories of network effects. He's also the co-author of a book called The Platform Revolution and can share his insights on the future of business platforms. Marshall?
It is indeed a great pleasure to be here, and I have to say, after the US elections, going and visiting this is a real pleasure and change of events. So I do encourage you to go visit the booths next door. I also want to thank Sandeep also for the introduction. He calls me an academic expert. I do want to assure you I also spent some time in semiconductor design, aerospace manufacture. I even had one of those important jobs where you can ask important questions such as, do you want fries with that? So I've done a number of things, but what I want to talk to you about this morning is really what I think are some fundamental changes in business model, give you some of the economics of it, why it's happening, so we can give you the evidence that in fact things are changing. Also, I want to see if I can describe how you can transform your own business models, what are the implications of that, and then if there's time to end just a little bit on Internet of Things to give you an example of how it changes from a product perspective to a platform perspective, since many of us will be engaged in that as the next generation of business model. So to give us a little bit of an example of some of the data, take a look at the columns here and see what you notice. There are some new age firms, many of them launched here in Silicon Valley, and then also several of the traditional industrial firms. I want to draw your attention to three different things. One is the speed of development. Uber, founded in 2009, is now as valuable as BMW in the private equity markets, founded a century ago, 1916. I was actually out there in Germany for their centennial, really very interesting event. Airbnb, founded in 2008, relative to Marriott, founded in 1927, Airbnb is actually quite valuable. Or how many of you have seen a Disney movie? Right? Do you have kids? It's become an iconic part of American culture, with different characters in there. Yet Facebook, now not in the private equity markets, but the true markets, actually more than twice as valuable as Walt Disney. One irony is that you and I are creating the content, not specialty programmers, not specialty copy editors within Walt Disney. And Kodak, a true industrial era firm, founded in 1888, in its heyday worth $30 billion, yet there's Instagram swapping photographs sold for $1 billion. With only 13 employees. So the things I want to draw your attention to are the speed of change. Two, the ratio of employment, 7,000 at Uber versus 116, or 13,000 at Facebook versus 185,000, and then the value creation. It's not a quite fair comparison because for Airbnb and Uber, you also need to account for the hosts and the drivers in there as well that are part of the equation. So we should include those as well overall. The claim I want to make is that we're about to see some fundamental shifts in business model. The shifts to the internet business models are as momentous as those of the industrial era, but it's going to be for the opposite reason. I'll make that clear in just a bit, but these, I'm going to argue, are huge changes in the economy, and we'll see if we can harness those changes as we move forward with different business models. Now, I don't know many of you have seen the most famous companies in the world. InterBrand every year produces a list of the most famous. This one's only 2 weeks old, so this is really recent data. So these are the most famous companies in the world. There's some European companies, there's some Asian companies. Among European companies, you can see BMW, you can see Daimler, you can see Samsung, some Asian, Toyota up there. What I also want to draw your attention to is 13 of the top 30, just in terms of fame, are what I would call platform companies. That is, they have external ecosystems associated with them. Either they are marketplaces or external ecosystems. Another one just worth noting, the third most famous up there, Coca-Cola, was the reigning champion until it got passed by Apple and Google within the same year. It's really quite remarkable. But 13 of the top 30 are platform companies. If you look at internet presence, growth of business models, it is overwhelmingly platform companies. In the United States, it's Facebook, Google, Amazon. If you look down in Latin America, it's also platform companies. If you look in China, it's Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba. And if you look in Europe, it's also platform companies, although for the most part, it's American platform companies, much to the consternation of the Europeans and some of the laws out there in Europe. Let's roll the clock back 15 years and look at the most valuable companies in the world. It tended to be energy and banking. We see GE, ExxonMobil, Citibank. You roll the clock forward 5 years. Again, energy and banking, ExxonMobil, GE, total, a few changes in the banks. Roll the clock forward another 5 years. Still energy and banking. What is it today? It's all platform companies. Staggering. All platform companies. There have been changes in the economy that are really quite profound. And again, I want to argue that this is a chain that's been continuing for quite some time. The product business model is broken. Any of you have a BlackBerry today? Anyone willing to admit you have a BlackBerry today? Right? They're down, the combined market share of BlackBerry and Microsoft is 0.3%. It's extraordinary how low it is. And it's interesting to note, in 2009, they had half the market, 49%. And in 4 short years, they dropped to 2%. That's hard to do. You don't want to be the executive management team leading that charge. I do want to draw your attention to the shape of the curve here. This is convex down. And I'm going to argue this is a feedback working against BlackBerry in this particular context, what happened in this particular firm. It's probably a feedback working for Apple and Google. We'll come back to that. I don't just want to pick on BlackBerry, however, but I want to use it to draw home the point that platforms beat products every time. In the 1980s, Apple had the superior product. Microsoft had the superior platform. It had 6 times the number of developers, 6 times the number of applications. So by the time of the antitrust trial, they were crushing Apple. Apple was predicted to go out of business in this case. This is the market capitalization of Apple in red and that of Microsoft in blue. And again, we see this exponential growth path as developers joined Microsoft, it expanded its ecosystem, users adopted, developers joined Microsoft. Really quite remarkable. Apple had the better product, Microsoft the better platform. And it's not just technology companies. Wonderful examples from Dassault Systèmes. If we look also at others that are trying to do it, these auto manufacturers, General Electric and Nike, are all trying to build out platforms, industrial forms of platforms. I like to use Nike as one example because a shoe company building platforms is a wonderful, and it's not just platform shoes, right? In this case, they're adding data and sensors in order to create an ecosystem around it. Well, what's the ecosystem? The data and sensors allow you to benchmark yourself, track your performance, improve your health, and compete with friends to get better at what you do, building community. Nike will connect you with others in the community. So if you want to go running here, you can connect with other runners in Cyprus or others in China. You can even help your team members compete and improve their performance. They add community and data to the product to build out an ecosystem. How is the column on the left related to the column on the right? How is the column on the left related to the column on the right? Well, you might notice the column on the left is largely engaged with production, and the other side is consumption. But I want to draw your attention to 2 particular facets. Facet 1 is that each side attracts more of the other. So more Uber riders attract more Uber drivers, more Airbnb hosts attract more Airbnb guests, more Android developers attract more Android users. There's a positive feedback. The second point, every single one of these is outside the organization. Here it is that users are creating value for users, or one side is creating value for the other side. And again, it's not necessarily by the firm itself, it's by ecosystem partners that are creating that value. So this is what we see characteristic of all of these exponential growth patterns. We see this again and again and again, whether it's Skype, Uber, Airbnb, Etsy, BlaBlaCar, others, characteristic exponential growth patterns based on this feedback of users creating value for users, or network effects. Which brings me to the point I wanted to make earlier. We're seeing the emergence of these giant firms, but it's for the opposite reason, what we saw before. What was the initial cause? What did we see in the industrial era? What happened? We got giant firms in energy and banking, and we see energy, this was electricity, it was Westinghouse and Edison. We see it in automotive, Ford Model T and General Motors. We saw it in steelworks, steel production, in Standard Oil. We saw it also in railroads. What was happening? Well, the first instance of something was massive fixed cost and then low marginal cost. Your first watt of electricity is really expensive. Your second, incredibly cheap. To ship your first railroad car was incredibly expensive. You had to lay track, buy cars, get rights of way. Second one, incredibly cheap. This created a positive feedback where scale allows you to drop your price, which attracts business, which gives you scale, which allows you to drop your price, drive out competitors, and you get this feedback of the business going. We get monopoly. We got antitrust. Notice Vanderbilt, the colossus of railroads, just like Apple, didn't make the goods that he shipped. He would tax the transit of goods between New York and Chicago exactly as Apple taxes the transit of goods today between the developer and the user. It doesn't produce the videos and the apps and the others. Apple's making money on the third-party content. It is a remarkable innovation in the business model. But notice, it's different in the internet economy of scale. Another word for a network effect, users creating value for users, is a demand economy of scale. That is, your product becomes more valuable with use as more people adopt it and more people consume it. On desktop operating systems, Microsoft has 85–90% market share. Alibaba has 80% market share of all e-commerce transactions in China. They do more business on Singles Day than Amazon does in a year. Android is now up to 87.5% market share. Staggering. The numbers were released only 2 weeks ago. Facebook, 1.7 billion users. First time in history, 1 billion people have been on the same platform in a single day. What's happening is a feedback effect. The product gets more valuable through use. Users create value for users, so users join, so it becomes more valuable, so users join. This is moving out the demand curve as opposed to shifting down the supply curve. It's the other side of the profit equation, and it is leading to giant firms. This also leads to changes in management practice. This changes to what we should do as we organize for economic activity. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that. Okay? The reason this is happening is you have to change. If value creation was traditionally done inside the firm, now we're going to have to examine value creation outside the firm for the simple reason you cannot scale network effects inside the firm as easily as outside. There are more people outside the firm. That means we need to tap the expertise, the brilliance ideas outside the organization. I'll give you 3 quick examples before trying to show you the transitions. But what I'm going to argue as a business school professor, it affects every single managerial function, whether this is HR doing more contracting, whether this is operations and logistics, whether this is strategy, whether this is finance. Let me give you a couple of examples, okay? Just a few. One is marketing. It used to be that the firm itself would do the messaging, and now many of the customers are doing the messaging. To do this, I'll illustrate the most famous branded company before platforms, Coca-Cola. They argued that we've seen the evolution of marketing over 4 decades, moving from single message to segmentation, to individual targeting, and then to virality and social influence as users start to propagate your message. What's interesting is that even the terminology has changed. So this is a slide from Coca-Cola. I'm going to overlay the additional insight, which is the language has changed from push and outbound messaging to pull and inbound messaging, much more customer self-service, and in addition, the customer is doing the messaging. I'll give you a wonderful example. Warby Parker produces sunglasses. They probably even use Dassault Systèmes to design them. Beautiful example. But they will ship you 5 pairs of glasses. Then they'll ask you to post your glasses to your social media, to Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and others, so your friends can vote on one, tell you how funny you look. But also so you can pick which fashions look good on you. But what are you doing? You are propagating their message on their behalf. It's brilliant. Your users are automatically doing your marketing for you. It's an incredible shift from inside to outside. Other examples, when Instagram sold for $1 billion, it wasn't because of 13 employees. I can guarantee you could have bought any one of them for a lot less than 1/13 of $1 billion, right? But it was the 30 million users. That's what was being purchased. It was the external community. It makes perfect sense when looked at that way. They position themselves to capture the information being created by the community. I'll give you another example, right? This is a fun one. This guy goes to the moon and takes 5 photos. They go to the bathroom and take 37. Instagram and others position themselves to capture the information being created by the external communities. That is a great way in which you need to capture the incremental value that's being created. Another thing that changes is operations and logistics, so supply chains. Every business, we should shift from internal to external servicing. Now, every business school in the world teaches porters, supply chain, value chain. It's basically a pipeline. You can think of it in the following way. Stuff moves, you take inputs to production, like those components for an automobile, you assemble them, you add value, and you ship them to customers. Or in the case of Coca-Cola, you take sugar water, you add branding, and you ship it to customers. That's what happens, okay? That's not how a platform works. A platform takes that supply and demand, and it splits them and takes them off platform. And it aggregates them from others. Now the trick is you take high quality stuff, it could be gold or coal, and you separate out the gold and the coal. All right, now back it up so you can illustrate it one more time. Right, separate the gold and the coal, and then, oh, no, it didn't, I was going to animate one more time for you. But what you do is you capture the good stuff and match the high quality to the customer. So only the good rides stay on Uber and the bad drivers get pushed off. The good places to stay on Airbnb stay, and the bad ones get pushed off. The curation becomes much more important in that mechanism. But notice, there's something really interesting that happens. The firm isn't producing the value, the outsiders are. Why does it scale so quickly? The firm isn't even including the marginal cost. Uber doesn't pay for the marginal cost of a ride. Airbnb doesn't pay for the marginal cost of a stay. That is why it scales so fast, and these organizations are coming out of nowhere to grow incredibly quickly. Notice also that there can be hybrid business models. On the far end is kind of down in Coca-Cola, where it's a pipeline business model, and at the far right is Airbnb and Uber. Those are pure platforms. In the middle are organizations like Apple and Samsung. They make stuff, but they are also platforms. And that is where most organizations will be, is the hybrid business model, making things, assembling things, but also catering to these external ecosystems. As another example, in Paris, Airbnb has 40,000 listings alone. There's no way Hyatt, Marriott, Intercontinental could have acquired that much property in that amount of time. They don't have the resources to do it. It's staggering how much growth can take place in such an ecosystem. Another illustration. This, fascinatingly, is a plot of the APIs, application programming interfaces on the web, data pulled from the programmable web. Where do you think Amazon is participating in the API economy? Amazon is compared to Walmart in one or two things alone. Now I ask you, both of them are expert at logistics. Which firm is expert at having third parties build on top of its ecosystems? One of those, Amazon. And if you look at the stock price performance over the past decade, you would have gotten a 12% return on Walmart, 1,500% return from Amazon. And the reason is you have external people selling their goods as stores on top of Amazon. They're setting up their shops on top of Amazon Cloud Services. It's extraordinary how many third parties are bringing Amazon that fascinating growth, that's putting them on that exponential growth curve compared to other organizations. A wonderful quote out here in Silicon Valley was in 2015, Uber, the world's taxi company, had no cars. Facebook, the world's most popular media company, didn't create any of its own content. Alibaba doesn't own its own inventory. Airbnb doesn't have any rooms. It's incredible when you don't own the marginal cost of production. You can scale infinitely, and it's a very, very different business model. R&D and innovation is another one that's actually really important. It used to be done just by the firm. You hired the world's experts to do incredible invention, to do engineering, to do design. I like to start with an old industrial product and a wonderful quote from Mark Andreessen, Silicon venture capitalist here, who's got lots of interesting scars from having built successful and unsuccessful platforms. And he points out a great platform can be adapted to ideas, needs, and niches the original designers didn't anticipate. So we can illustrate this with a fun example from an industrial product. One of the very first modular industrial products was the Ford Model T. Well, users could disassemble the modules, reassemble them, and from that, we got the Ford Model T hay carrier, the Ford Model T flour mill, the race car, the mobile church, snowmobile, sawmill, and goat carrier. Each of these innovations, if you will, created by users. The thing I want to draw your attention to, though, a couple of different points of this. Oh, by the way, also, does openness work? These are winner-take-all markets. MySpace was ahead. Why did Facebook win? The red line is accesses to MySpace. The blue line is accesses to Facebook. Any guesses as to what happened? Let's see if I can do the laser pointer in here. Any guesses what happened with that first bump in 2006? That's when they opened from .edu to .com. That's the first bump. But how about that convex exponential growth period? What happened? Well, that's partly where they opened up to developers. That's when Zynga brought the Mafia Wars and Farmville and poker. Folks started spending hours on Facebook, inviting their friends in. New developers came in and brought new stuff, which brought more users, which created this feedback again and opened the ecosystem. In fact, the founder of MySpace mentions this in kind of a post-mortem described in Business Week. We tried to create every feature in the world and said, okay, we can do it. Why shouldn't we own all the profits? We should have picked 5 to 10 key things and let the ecosystem build everything else. What had he done? He just made the same mistake Apple had made in the 80s and 90s. They tried to go it alone. They were there first. They should have won this battle. They didn't get it right because they didn't know what they're doing in terms of opening an ecosystem relative to a platform. That's the other half of the quote. We should have stayed to 5 to 10 key features and let anyone else innovate on it. If you take any platform, your phone is going to come preloaded with contact management, MP3, and web browsing, and it's going to have tens of thousands of other things that are out there. Microsoft has Windows, and it owns Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, and there are tens of thousands of other things out there. You don't need to own it all. What I want you to do is add up in your head how much value is created by the platform here. Then add up how much value is created by the ecosystem from there all the way to here. The last little tiny piece is a sliver of value, but the addition of all that value swamps the value created by the platform itself. That's why they're so much more valuable as ecosystems rather than standalone plays. Let me illustrate that for you one other way. Here's the innovation trajectory of a single firm with its own R&D department. I don't care what the innovation trajectory looks like. Give it a particular slope. Now, what I want to do is open the ecosystem and invite third parties in to help you out to change that slope. If it's the case that you increase the slope with third parties helping you out, you can start from behind, start from a lower value proposition. But you have to overtake the product leader because your value accretion rate is occurring at a faster pace. You have to win. That is, again, why platforms beat products every time. You have to manage for the ecosystem. And there's a wonderful innovation trick that takes place inside this. What is your cost of failure if Flappy Birds never gets off the ground? Well, that's an app. You're not bearing the cost. So your cost of failure is near zero. On the other hand, what's your upside if Angry Birds massively succeeds? You take 30%. That's a hell of an innovation trick. You shed your cost of failure and you capture the upside. That's really neat. Again, I want to argue, it doesn't matter where you look. Any one of the business functions must take on an external counterpart. It's not as though the old stuff doesn't matter. There will always be supply-side economies of scale. What I want to point out is that in any economy where there are also demand-side economies of scale or network effects, user creating value for users, every single managerial function must take on an external counterpart. In IT, we went from back office ERP to front office CRM. Now we have to manage out of office social systems. The language changes in marketing. Operations and logistics is outside. Strategy. It's not just protected barriers to area and owning it. You have to actually open the ecosystem so third parties can help you out and focus on the interactions, not just creating barriers to entry. You want frictionless entry of demand and supply. Human resources is not just internal employees, it's also external communities and freelancers, as with Airbnb and Uber. And finance, it's not just valuation of the internal assets, it's the valuation of the external community, as we just saw with Instagram. It's a great example of that. We've got a few minutes left, so I want to give you an idea on, well, okay, these platforms are important. How do you make the transition? How would you do that? Products to platforms are two good ways to do this. One of these is to open the ends of your supply chain to each other, and the other is to add information and community, to think about what you can do with your information and your users that help them out. So these two mechanisms. So let's start with a standard supply chain. And then we've got, supply, manufacture, assembly to retail. So stuff flows in one direction, money flows in the opposite direction. So value accumulates from stage to stage. There's linear value chain. Logistics optimize the stuff, usually not the incentives, and there are no network effects, not users creating value for users. Then, so we'll just make that an abstract, and if you look at each component, the left three could be a B2B platform. The right three can be the B2C platform. Now watch how it happens. We'll take the middle one, and we're becoming a matching marketplace for those two. So that's the B2C platform. Now I want to pull down and then start. I'm going to sell my customers the stuff that I did before, but I'm now going to start to open up the sides of my supply chain so that each side can reach the other. So make your business a platform by facilitating the interactions across your value chain. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up to new business partners that now will also reach that group of customers that I had before, and then I'm going to open it up to new kinds of customers. The trick here is to make sure that all of the flows, the stuff and the money, occur through the platform so that you can track it, right? Just like Vanderbilt on the railroads or Apple on iTunes. And then you want to foster as many interactions as taking place as possible so you create those network effects. Users creating value for users, increase those interactions. I'll give you an example. John Deere sells tractors, and they can sell parts and stuff to suppliers, but they've opened up their own wonderful platform in a way that you can then sell SERDs, pest control, and fertilizer and soil analysis off to farmers. You can open it up further so that you can sell yield management and insurance, also through the platform to farmers. Then you can open it up to other job operators to operate the tractors. Then you can open it up to precision mapping in the agriculture, so you can drive the tractors around, and commodities selling. And you can open it up to software integration and data analytics. All of this built on top of an ecosystem in a way that you've now built a platform, and you're not just selling a tractor anymore. You're not just selling a product, you've created an ecosystem. My favorite example is actually from McCormick Spice. How in the hell are you going to make a platform out of salt and pepper? Can you get much more of a commodity than that? Well, they did something brilliant, which is that do those two things I mentioned, add information and an ecosystem, add community. So what they do is they focus on a flavor print profile. They use their labs to actually develop senses and test. Do people like licorice, fruity, minty, garlicky, meaty? From that profile, they can identify the components that you're going to like for a particular recipe and embed those in a particular flavor and recommend recipes to you. They can also say, well, what's going to be healthy? What's going to be diabetic? What is your 8-year-old going to enjoy when they don't usually eat their vegetables? And you can get that to work. But it gets a step better. Users can download these recipes, modify the recipes, and re-upload them. This becomes a sensing function for the firm to detect what's a new flavor that's emerging, what's a new series of recipes that's coming out. Using an example of their version, Dassault Systems are much more sophisticated, but here you can look at the flavor geometry. If you want more garlic in your veggie risotto, you can expand this proportionately, and the consumers don't even need to know the numbers of the ingredients list. It'll handle it automatically for you, and you re-upload that for someone else. They can now sell this information to packaged goods companies. They can sell it to restaurants. And they sell it to grocery stores to pull in new business. It's a great new business model. How about Dassault Systems? Fantastic example is the living heart simulation. You've already got wonderful different communities. Researchers who are ingesting, you get massive amounts of data that no single researcher could ingest on their own. Industry translating research to practice. Clinicians doing in silico training to see what's better. As an academic, I'm really interested in what's going to improve our performance. In silico training, and regulators doing compliance testing. Which information is being then, in the information exhaust, being used for others that makes them better off. You can create these information ecosystems. One thing I do want to draw your attention to as another trick for actually innovating and improving these ecosystems. One is you've got to move past the information to the recommendations. I'll give you a wonderful example. Silicon Valley and Hollywood are great examples of this. Reed Hastings offered to sell half, or a little bit less than half of Netflix to Blockbuster in 2000, and they turned him down. The TV executives, Hollywood, NBC, ABC, said, you have nothing that we need. They're just shipping DVDs at this point. They had no major content. Well, how did they solve that problem? They did it by offering a recommender system. Well, what does a recommender system do? It matches people to content. So if they don't have the high quality content, they get that spaghetti western, they get that science fiction movie that they know one person particularly like, and they still create a useful experience for that one person, even though they don't have the blockbuster. But they took it recently a step further. Because now that they've got the recommender system, they can say, geez, I want to take a look at this book, and that book, and I'm going to create this movie out of it. I know the components, I can run it through my design system, and the recommender system becomes its own design tool, and I can now sell that back in ways that none of those other books were even that popular. What did they do with House of Cards? They ran it through their ecosystem with 77,000 parameters and predicted that was going to be a success before they dropped lots of money on it. It's a brilliant use of information as a design tool. I think I'm going to run slightly past time here, but I want to give you one last idea as to why platforms beat products using an illustration from IoT. Okay? What is more commoditized than the light bulb invented almost 140 years ago? Nobody makes money on a light bulb. It's a 40-cent product in there. Okay? Energy efficiency, 5%. Folks have used design tools and other things to try to improve the efficiency. So you could go to the compact fluorescent, double the energy efficiency, and now you can charge $10. This is sounding pretty good. That's an order of magnitude. Or we can go to these LEDs where you can actually program them. I can create moods in your room. I can create romantic sunsets for my love, right? I can put the kids to sleep with soft lighting in different areas and program that on my phone. Well, guess what? Now the price is looking at $40. That's a factor of 100. This is looking great. Don't stop there. We've already got the data and sensors in there. I want to design a platform ecosystem as opposed to a product. So I'm going to take those sensors. I'm going to say, now I can offer Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or cloud services in any room of the home. I've already got that built into the bulb. I can do security alerts with the sensors in there. So I can see if someone's going into the home, or I can warn parents if their toddler has wandered into the street. I can bundle it and do energy demand management and sell that back to, with the Internet of Things, I can sell that back to the utility company. The price per kilowatt hour of a low demand is about $40. Price per kilowatt at peak demand is about $1,000. That's really expensive difference. You'd like to be able to manage that. Any of you have elderly parents that don't take their medication? Well, now I can have the room remind grandma she needs to take her meds, or if she falls, she can call out for help in any particular room. I fall and can't get up, and the ecosystem can call and summon help in that particular context. Or how many of you have teenage kids you can't get off the game to take out the garbage? I do, right? I'd like to be able to program the system and say, John, you're taking out the garbage, or the internet's turning off in your room. Right? And then you can actually do it. Now I ask you, try selling the $4 bulb when the company is giving away the $40 bulb in order to capture this ecosystem of services. The product with a factor of 100 in its value proposition cannot compete with the ecosystem. The ecosystem play will always win. Okay? This is going to happen for IoT and a lot of other different ecosystems. So I want to point out, this is going to happen all over the place. So car as platform. It's not just going to be the device, but also think of the entertainment systems, the operating system, the connected services and professional services that are going to be on top of the platform. City as platform. I strongly encourage you to go see the simulation of Singapore over there. This is actually another data taken from Singapore, where they're opening up ecosystems so folks can build apps and match taxis to rain, doing other different activities. So you think city as platform, another one that's going to open up broadly. Internet of Things as platform, we just took a look at. Energy smart grids as platform, there's going to be lots of energy trading with spare capacity, exactly as we're seeing the trading with spare capacity in Airbnb and Uber. Education as platform. We academics are also on the chopping block. There's going to be lots more as they move into massive open online courses taught as platforms at scale to tens of thousands of people. Healthcare as platform, another entire industry that is going to be transformed. So I simply want to summarize, for the sake of argument, platforms are going to beat products every time. They always win in any market where both of them emerge. They innovate faster, and the value is proportional to use, so as you get more of them, they rise. The business model differs, they flip, they invert. The reason is network effects don't scale as quickly inside the firm as easily as outside, and that means every single business function needs to take on an external counterpart, and you can create these massive firms if you do this in the right way. The key assets are information and community, and you manage the transition by opening the ends of the supply chain or transitioning it, and use data and recommender systems for design as the way to do that. So with that, I thank you very much for your time and hope this would be useful. Thank you.